In this video, we are going to focus on graphing straight lines. When linear rules are graphed, all the points lie in a straight line. So it is therefore possible to graph a straight line using only 2 points on a Cartesian plane. For example, if you were given the rule y equals negative x plus 4, you would use it to complete the missing numbers in the table of values as seen below. So this here is a table of values. This is the x-axis on a Cartesian plane. This is a y-axis on the Cartesian plane. Usually we get given the x-axis and we have to discover the y-axis based on the rule that we have been given. So all you need to do is substitute the x in the linear equation for the value of the x given in the table of values to be able to solve y. So I've got 2 examples here for you. The first answer of 10 and the second answer of 7, because normally this would be empty and you would then answer that by using this rule and this value of x. So first of all, you write the rule, which I've done here in blue, and it says y equals negative 3x plus 4. So all you simply do is substitute and then you go through the order of operations. So I've now got my second line of substitution, so y equals negative 3 times negative 2, because that's the value of x. So I've substituted the value of x for the value of x in the table of values, because we are focusing on this one here. And I drop down the plus 4. I solve the multiplication. Negative 3 times negative 2 equals 6. Drop the plus 4 down and add those together to solve to get 10, and I write that into the table. For the second answer of 7, again, you write the rule given. The second line is substitution. So now the value of x is negative 1. So negative 3 times negative 1 plus 4. Solve the multiplication because it comes first in order of operations. So negative 3 times negative 1 is 3. Drop down the plus 4, add 3 and 4, and I get 7, and then I write it in the table. And I do the same thing for the rest of them. So after you complete the table of values, you plot the coordinates on the Cartesian plane. Remember, x comes before y. So I've recreated our table of values up here, and I have now made them into coordinates. So taken from the table, this is x, this is y, and x comes before y. So negative 2 and 10 becomes bracket, negative 2 comma 10 bracket. Negative 1 and 7 becomes bracket, negative 1 comma 7 bracket. 0 and 4, bracket, 0 comma 4 bracket. 1 and 1, bracket, 1 comma 1 bracket. 2 and negative 2, bracket 2 comma negative 2 bracket. And last one, 3 and negative 5, bracket 3 comma negative 5 bracket. So we have taken coordinates from this table, because that's essentially what we've done. We've calculated using a rule the table of values, which then turn into coordinates, which we then plot onto our Cartesian plane. So I'm going to take you through this Cartesian plane. Before we do, you need to remember that plots should end up in a straight line. Remember, linear means straight, so it must be a straight line to be correct. And if you take your coordinates and plot them, and it's a little bit all over the place, it actually means that you have made a mistake in your table of values calculations. So you need to make sure you go back and double check that. Once you've got all your dots, your plots on there, you need to draw a line through them and pass the end dots and add arrows. So I've already done that for you, but I'm going to take you back now and show you how I did it. Starting with negative 2 and 10. You have to remember that x comes before y. So this is an x and this is a y. This is an x, this is a y, x, y, x, y, x, y, x, y. And remember, the rule of thumb is you have to crawl before you walk. So when you're young, you horizontally crawl across the floor before you get older, and you stand up and walk and go up vertical. So crawl before you walk, that's the rule of thumb. Let's take a look at the first one, negative 2 and 10. We start in the origin, we go -2 on the x and up to +10, and we put a dot there. The next one is -1 and 7. Start in the middle, go across -1 and up to 7 and put a dot. 0 and 4. We stay in the middle of the origin and just go up to 4 and put a dot. 1, 1. Start in the middle, go to the right 1 and up 1. Place a dot. 2 and -2. We start in the middle, we go out to 2 and down to -2. We put a dot. And then we go 3 and -5. We go out to 3, down to -5 and put a dot. And as you can see, once I've done that, you should see that you have a straight line there. You grab your ruler, rule through it and put 2 arrows on the end. When linear rules are graphed, all the points lie in a straight line. So it is possible to graph a straight line using only 2 points. The 2 points that help us draw these graphs are the x-intercept and the y-intercept. The x-intercept is the x value at the point on the x-axis where y equals 0. So substitute y equals 0 to find the x-intercept. And you do the opposite for the y-intercept. The y-intercept is the y value at the point on the y-axis where x equals 0. Substitute x equals 0 to find the y-intercept. We are going to take a look at an example here. We've been given the equation 2x plus 4y equals 8. And like it's set up here in the red writing, you have to put down if x equals 0 and if y equals 0, so we can then calculate the coordinates to be able to plot them on the Cartesian plane. So we've got the rule and we've got to then rewrite the rule and substitute and then calculate as you would normally do. So I'm now going to rewrite this for us. So it says if x equals 0, I'm going to take this and rewrite it and make x equals 0. So I put down here 2 bracket 0 because 2 times x, so x is 0. Then I simply write out the rest of it, 4y equals 8. And now I can then calculate as I would normally do. So if you look at this, 2 bracket 0 bracket means 2 times 0. And that actually is just a 0. So that can be crossed out. And then we rewrite this down below, 4y equals 8. And now we have a multiplication situation. The opposite of multiplication is division. So put down our fraction lines and the number next to the pronumeral goes under both sides because what you do to one side, you must do to the other. We're now going to cancel out and solve for y. So 4 divided by 4 equals 1. We drop the y down. We never put the 1 in front of it. And how many times does 4 go into 8? It goes 2 times. So now we know that the coordinate down here is, so I'll write this down, coordinates, open the bracket up, 0 because we said if x is 0, this is the x-axis, and we've just discovered the y-axis is 2, and then we close the bracket, and now we have a coordinate to plot. We've got one coordinate done. We're going to do exactly the same thing now on the right-hand side for y. So if y equals 0, I'm now going to recreate this equation and substitute the value of y for a 0. So we write down 2x plus 4. Now it's 4 times y. Y is going to be a 0 and equals 8. You have to put the brackets around the 0. You don't put times 0. Now we are going to look at cancelling out this 4 and then solving like a linear equation. So when we go down here, we can see that 4 times 0 is 0. So we can actually just cancel that out straight away. And now we rewrite what we have left, which is 2x equals 8. And now we have a multiplication situation. So the opposite of multiplication is division. we put fraction lines underneath each one of those to indicate division, and the number next to the pronumeral goes underneath because what you do to one side, you do to the other. 2 divided by 2 cancels out, and we drop the x down. 2 divided by 2 equals 1. We don't put a 1 in front of the x, that's why we say it cancels out. Equal sign, how many times does 2 go into 8? It goes 4 times. Now we have the value of x. So we can write down the coordinates, and what we have here, coordinates, open the bracket up. We now know that the value of x is 4, and we knew that the value of y was a 0. Now we have coordinates 0, 2 and 4, 0. We are also aware that this is the x and the y, the x and the y, because x comes before y, we crawl before we walk. So now we are going to plot this on the Cartesian plane over here on the right hand side. So let's take a look at this first coordinate. We have 0 and 2, so we start right in the origin and we don't go anywhere because we stay on 0, and then we go up the y-axis to 2 and we put a dot there. We do the same thing here. We go to the coordinates 4 and 0. So we start at the origin, we go across 4, and then we don't go anywhere because we are at 0. So now we have to draw a straight line through these dots. It's going to be a little bit tricky for me. I haven't got a ruler, but we will go through here. Oops, a little bit crooked there. And you draw a arrow on each end, and that technically, even though it's a terrible drawing, should be a straight line. So you only need 2 coordinates to get a straight line using a rule and calculating as you would do a linear equation. Let's now take a look at the second example here. We have an equation here which says 3x minus y equals 6. And like before, we have to set this up. We say if x equals 0 and if y equals 0. This means that the x coordinate in this one we're going to create will be 0, and this y coordinate will be 0. So we have to do our first substitution here. I'm going to rewrite this and substitute for this side here. So we write 3 bracket, because x now becomes a 0 bracket, and we write the rest of it down as we would normally do. Now we need to go through this. We can look at this first part here, this multiplication, and we can cancel that out because 3 times 0 is 0, and we simply write this down. Negative y equals 6. Now what you need to understand is that in front of this negative y is an invisible 1. So I'm going to just do this now. Put a little dotted 1 there. So if you ever get a pronumeral on its own, you must put the value of 1 there so it's easy for your brain to understand it. And now what we have is a multiplication situation. And opposite of multiplication is division. So I put my fraction lines, and I'm going to put a negative 1 underneath both, because what you do to one side you do to the other. And that's why I got you to put the negative 1, put the 1 in there, so it's easy for you to know what goes underneath both sides. And of course, negative 1 divided by negative 1 equals 1. We cross that out, we drop the y, the equals, and go how many times does negative 1 go into 6? It goes negative 6 times. And now I write the coordinates down the bottom. So coordinates, and that is a bracket, a 0, negative 6 bracket. So now I've solved the first lot of coordinates. And now I'm going to do exactly the same thing here on the right hand side for y. I'm going to rewrite the rule and substitute the value of y in for 0. So now we go 3x minus, I can simply put a 0 here. I don't need to put it around brackets because we don't have a number in front of it. It's invisible 1. I don't put a 1 bracket, 0 bracket. So equals, and now what we need to do is notice that we can just simply cancel that 0 out. We don't need it, it's sitting there doing nothing, so our negative 0 gets cancelled out regardless if it's in brackets or next to another number. It just disappears. So now we have to write down 3x equals 6. That's our next line because we simply dropped down what we haven't used yet. And now we're going to look at this as a multiplication situation. and the opposite of multiplication is division, and then I take the number next to the pronumeral and give it to both sides, because what you do to one side you must do to the other. We can cancel the 3's out because 3 divided by 3 equals 1. We drop the x down. We never put a 1 in front of the x. That's why we say it cancels out. And then how many times does 3 go into 6? It goes 2 times. So now I can write my coordinates. Open the bracket up. The x is 2 and the y is 0. So you can see here, if I go back through this, the x is 0 in this situation, and what you just calculated is the y. In this situation, we calculated the x, and the y was given to us as a 0. So now we are going to plot this on the Cartesian plane. So we're going to search for these coordinates, put dots down, and draw a straight line. So we have a 0 and a -6 here. So I go straight into the middle of the origin, and I'm simply not going to go anywhere because this is the x. So I can't go anywhere. So x stays here, and then I come down to a -6 and put a dot there. The next coordinate is 2, 0. So I start in the middle of the origin, go across 2, and it sits there because I'm not going anywhere on the vertical axes. It's 0. Now I have to draw a line between the two of them, so I'm going to try and draw a straight line. You draw an arrow on the end. That's a bit wonky, apologise for that. And now you have plotted your straight line using 2 points.